And now let's turn our attention to Jason Margolis, the reporter for PRI's The World. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Well, PRI is creating content and providing marketing for the collaboration. And as part of the marketing rule, PRI will conduct station webinars and roll out universal promotional materials for stations. The content is accessible via the Knowledge Network. PRI's content for the collaboration largely comes from The World, where I work. The World is a one-hour daily program focused on international news for an American audience. The World is broadcast in 280 cities, including the nation's top 10 markets, reaching an audience of 2.7 million listeners. At The World, we strive to make international news relevant and interesting for an American audience. Our challenge is twofold: how to tell foreign stories with strong hooks for an American audience, and how to find domestic stories with strong foreign angles. So when I'm working on a story, I always ask myself, why would somebody in Wisconsin or Alabama care about this? How does a story about international economics impact them? Well, I'd like to play a 50-second clip from a piece I did in January about how the current recession went global.
Then last fall, the U.S. economy began shaking violently. Then European banks began wobbling too.
And then in turn, Europe had enormous financial links to Eastern Europe, which was in an untenable position once there was no cheap credit.
That's economist Barry Bosworth at the Brookings Institution. So America falters, then Western Europe, then Eastern Europe. Edward Alden at the Council of Foreign Relations picks up the string.
The United States has, for the last couple of decades, been the major source of economic demand in the world. And that has been an economic engine for Asia, for the Middle East, for Latin America.
So here we sit today. From some bad mortgage loans in Florida and California, there goes the global economy.
Well, that story was about 6 minutes in total, so of course there was a lot more information there. But I played that clip today to illustrate this point. Hopefully somebody listening to my story came away with a better understanding of how financial decisions in the U.S. impact Europe and Asia, and vice versa. Besides our one-hour radio program, we also have a global economy podcast. Now, many radio programs offer podcasts that simply replay stories that have already been on the radio, and that's great. We have podcasts like that too. But for the Global Economy podcast, which I'm in charge of, we try to take things a step further. So, for example, I'll play a story that already aired on the radio program, but then I'll add in an extended interview with an economist or somebody featured in a story. As for the format, it's a bit sloppy and quick, and that's the way we like it. The podcast has a much smaller, targeted audience, so we feel we can be a bit more casual and at the same time offer deeper analysis. As for where we get our news from, we have correspondents across the globe in London, Beirut, Beijing, and Boston, to name but a few places. We also rely on a great team of stringers in spots where American news consumers don't get much news, places like Sofia, Bulgaria, and La Paz, Bolivia. And because The World is a joint production of the BBC World Service, we have access to great reporters in many places in between. And what I mean on our slide by "we're not the Wall Street Journal" is this: know your audience. Now, I have great respect for the Wall Street Journal. It's invaluable, but they have their audience and we have ours. We're not trying to be the paper of record. We're also not trying to report every single economic indicator that comes out. Rather, we try to tell stories about the people behind some of those numbers.
Thank you so much, Jason. The World continues to give us a perspective of our duty as a global citizen, so I appreciate the information. Now we're